For more than half a century, we've all been told the moon landing was humanity's single greatest leap. But what if it wasn't? What if it was all an elaborate show? Today, we're diving into a book that makes that very claim, Ralph Rene's NASA Mooned America. It alleges one of the most unbelievable deceptions of all time. So let's pull back the curtain on this one. Right from the jump, the book hits you with this quote. It's really setting the tone, isn't it? The author's message is pretty clear. Just because you've heard a story over and over again for 50 years, well, that doesn't automatically make it true. And the main idea of the book? It's a total bombshell. It argues that no human being has ever traveled beyond Earth's protective radiation shield. That means the entire Apollo program, according to this source, was nothing more than a brilliantly staged production. So when you're making a claim that big, where do you even start? Well, according to this book, the deception didn't just begin with Apollo 11. The first major point of the argument is that NASA was faking photos years before anyone was supposed to have walked on the moon. The book points to this as Exhibit A, calling them the Spacey twins. Okay, so on the left, you've got astronaut Michael Collins in a training flight. On the right, that's supposed to be a picture from his real spacewalk. The author says, look, just take the training photo and flip it horizontally. He claims it's an exact match, proof that it was doctored. He even says NASA had to cook up a story about Collins losing his camera just to explain where this picture came from. And, the photo questions don't stop there. The book lays out a whole gallery of oddities. Like, why does this rock seem to have a perfect letter C on it, like a prop from a movie set? And if the sun's the only light out there, why are these shadows pointing in totally different directions? How can a camera's crosshair end up behind something in the picture? And of course, the big one, how on earth is a flag fluttering where there's no air? All these little visual details really boil down to one central nagging question that the book keeps asking. If they really went to the moon, why would they ever need to fake even a single photograph? The author's answer is pretty straightforward. They faked the pictures because the trip itself was impossible. And that brings us to the second big part of the argument. This is where we move past just looking at photos and into the claim that the whole mission was a non-starter from day one, all because of the dangers of space and the limits of the tech back then. At the very core of this impossibility argument are the Van Allen radiation belts. The book presents them as this deadly, impassable barrier of killer radiation. The claim is really blunt. There was just no way the technology in the 1960s could have protected the astronauts from a lethal dose on their way to the moon. Period. Now check this out, because the book highlights what it sees as a major contradiction. On one hand, you have the early Russian cosmonauts who were just in Earth's orbit. Yuri Gagarin said he saw astonishingly bright stars. But then you have the American Apollo astronauts who were supposedly out in deep space, and they kept saying the stars were dim and fuzzy. So the book asks a pretty logical question. Why would the view get worse once you're outside the atmosphere? Shouldn't it be crystal clear? You know, a conspiracy this big isn't just about the science and the technology. The book argues you have to look at the people involved, the human element, the secrets they might have been forced to keep, and maybe even the price some of them paid. The book goes back and re-examines the tragic Apollo 1 fire, and it doesn't see an accident. It suggests something much more sinister. It lists this whole chain of suspicious events. The hatch was switched last minute to one that couldn't be opened from the inside during a fire. The cockpit was filled with highly flammable stuff in a 100% oxygen environment. And key safety gear that was there before, suddenly gone. To top it all off, it claims that after the fire, agents went to astronaut Gus Grissom's home and took his personal diary. Okay, so how could every single astronaut keep a secret of this magnitude for their entire lives? The book puts forward a pretty shocking idea. It calls the Manchurian Candidate theory. It suggests the astronauts might have gone through some kind of intense brainwashing or hypnosis. This would make them either genuinely believe the lie themselves or just be psychologically blocked from ever telling the truth. So that leads us to the final and maybe most important question of all. If any of this is true, how in the world did they pull it off? This last part of the book really tries to break down the psychology behind the whole alleged hoax and why the public was so ready to believe. The author introduces this idea he calls the emotional belief system, or EBS. Basically, his theory is that we're all taught the moon landing story when we're kids. It gets wired into our brains as a core belief. So when someone comes along with facts that contradict it, our gut reaction isn't to examine the facts. It's to get angry and reject whatever is threatening that core belief we've had our whole lives. So, according to the book, here's how the deception worked, broken down into 3 steps. Step 1, the distraction. You have the massive rocket launch with all the flame, fury, and flash. It's a huge public show that gets everyone looking one way. Step 2, the control. All the video feeds are routed through a central computer, which lets them swap out the real feed with a pre-recorded simulation. And step 3, the justification. The Cold War pressure to beat the Soviets gave them the perfect motive to do whatever it took to win. And the book leaves us with one final, kind of chilling image to think about. When the lunar module blasts off from the moon's surface, the TV camera on the ground smoothly tilts up to follow it. Now, NASA said this was done by remote control from Houston, despite the time delay. But the book asks a much simpler and maybe more unsettling question. If both astronauts were inside the module, who was holding the camera?